Good morning, great souls. Welcome to our Monday morning, the New Path book study and meditations. This is our fifth class. It's a month ago, almost to the day that we begun in January. So welcome. Let's begin with a prayer. And let's just feel the masters with us dynamically. And let's pray. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of East and West, Jesus, Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Kriyananda, and beloved Paramhansa Yogananda, and our friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we lovingly bow at thy feet. Bless this satsang. Help us to tune in to the personal and impersonal aspects of God and Guru, and our ability to pray and make a difference with our very lives, today and every day. Om Peace. Amen. Okay, let's start with a brief chant. I particularly wanted to pick this chant. Swami sings it. It's an older chant, but just to tune into some of what we're going to be tuning into today. So.
Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation, sitting in the asana of meditation. Think ye of your Guru's lotus feet. Think ye of your Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation, sitting in the asana of meditation. Think ye of your Guru's lotus feet. Think ye of your Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation, sitting in the asana of meditation. Think ye of your Guru's lotus feet. Think ye of your Guru's lotus feet.
And let's just sit in meditation for a moment, bringing to mind our Guru, for those that Yogananda is the Guru, or the great Indian master, Paramhansa Yogananda. Feel he's sitting within you, or in front of you, next to you, and that you're offering your heart's devotion to him now. For he has impacted the United States of America, the whole world, and each of us. Okay, so Welcome to this morning, this Monday. I'm still reading. I didn't get to get the copy of the audio, and I can't play this particular chapter on Audible. So we're going to read about 10 minutes worth of reading, and then I'm going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to dive into meditation quite early on. So let me just come back to where we were. We've just heard that about Master, this is chapter 17, Mount Washington Estates. We've just heard that Master is running onto the stage at his talks, asking everybody, how feels everybody? And everyone knows to shout, awake and ready. And with this dynamic charged consciousness, this is how he reaches people throughout the United States of America and really dives into the hearts and minds of people. And here we go, we continue on at page 169. Louise Royston told me a charming little story from Yogananda's 1927 visit to Mount Washington, D.C. There, Madame Amelita Galli-Curci, the world-renowned opera singer, became his disciple. At this time, Galli-Curci had reached the pinnacle of her own extraordinary fame. One evening, while singing before a packed concert hall, she spotted her guru seated in the balcony. Interrupting the performance, she pulled out a handkerchief and waved it eagerly in his direction. The Swami, in his turn, rose and waved back at her. The audience, finally, seeing whose presence it was that had interrupted the program, broke into enthusiastic cheers and applause, sustaining the acclamation for several minutes. One reason for the almost overwhelming response the master received everywhere was that, unlike most public speakers, he never looked upon his audiences as nameless crowds, even when they numbered many thousands. He was amazingly sensitive to each listener as an individual. Often he would address himself to the specific needs of a single member of his audience. I myself sometimes had the experience of hearing him during the course of a public lecture, addressing briefly some private difficulty of my own. When I thanked him mentally, he glanced smilingly at me before continuing his discourse. Mr. Oliver Rogers, later Brother Devananda, an older man who entered Mount Washington as a monk a year or two after me, once told the master in my presence, I heard you lecture 25 years ago at Symphony Hall in Boston. Through the years since then, I often wondered where you were. I suppose it was my karma that I had to seek God first in other ways, but the compelling inspiration behind my search was always that evening with you in Symphony Hall. It was strange too, Mr. Rogers continued reflectively. That huge hall was completely packed, yet through your entire lecture, you kept your eyes fixed on me. I remember, replied the master with a quiet smile. Above all, during every public lecture, Swami Yogananda sought souls who were spiritually ready to devote their lives to God. As he often put it, I prefer a soul to a crowd, though I love crowds of souls. During his transcontinental tour in 1924, many would have been thrilled for Swami Yogananda to make his home in their cities. To every such invitation, however, he replied, my soul calls me to Los Angeles. Years later, a guest at Mount Washington asked him, which do you consider the most spiritual place in America? I have always considered Los Angeles the Benares of America, the master replied. To Los Angeles he came. People flocked to his lectures in unprecedented numbers, even for that city, noted as it is for its interest in matters spiritual. Weeks passed in unceasing public service, and then he informed his delighted students that he planned to establish his headquarters in their city. Numerous properties were shown him. None corresponded to the visions he had received in India, however. He continued his search. In January 1925, he was out driving one day with 2 or 3 students, including Arthur Comita, a young man who, with Ralph, another student, had chauffeured the master across America. They drove up winding Mount Washington Drive. As they passed Mount Washington Estates, the master cried out, "Stop the car!" "You can't go in there," his companions protested. "That's private property." But Yogananda was not to be dissuaded. He entered the spacious grounds and strolled about in silence. At last, holding on to the railings above the tennis courts, he exclaimed quietly, "This place feels like home." As it turned out, the property had recently been put up for sale. There were other people already who wanted to buy it, but Yogananda knew it was destined to be his. So certain was he, in fact, that he invited all his students in Southern California to a dedication ceremony on the still unpurchased land. During a speech that day, he informed them, "This place is yours." The price of the property was $65,000. The master was on the very point of signing the purchase agreement when his hands froze in immobility. "God held my hand from signing," he told me years later, "because he wanted me to have the property for less money." A few days afterwards, another real estate agent who was found who agreed to negotiate terms. The seller consented to come down to $45,000, provided that the sum was paid in full at the time of purchase, and the date be set no later than 3 months from the day Yogananda signed the agreement. The price, though excellent, represented a lot of money, particularly in those days when the dollar had a much higher value than it has today. When Yogananda's student learned that he had only 3 months to raise the entire sum, their interest waned noticeably. One lady exclaimed in dismay, "Why, it would take you 20 years to raise that much money." "20 years," replied the master, "for those who think 20 years. 20 months for those who think 20 months. And 3 months for those who think 3 months." He did, in fact, acquire the money in 3 months. The story of how he did it illustrates wonderfully the power of faith. There was a student of Swami's, a Mrs. Ross Clark, whose husband some months previously had contracted double pneumonia. The man's doctor had said he couldn't live. "Oh, yes, he will live," declared the master when Mrs. Clark turned to him for help. Going to her husband's bedside, he had sat there and prayed deeply. The man was cured. Thus it was that when Mrs. Clark learned of the master's dilemma, she told him, "You saved my husband's life. I want to help you. Would you accept a loan of $25,000 without interest for 3 years?" Would he? Other money? Other money, he told me, began pouring in from our centers around the country. So we had another $15,000, making $40,000 in all. But the final purchase date was approaching, and we still lacked $5,000 of the total price. I wrote Mrs. Clark again to see if she could help us with this amount. Regretfully, she answered, "I've done all I can." I thanked her once again for the enormous help she had given already. But where was that help going to come from? At last, just one day remained. The situation was desperate. If we didn't get those $5,000 by noon the next day, we would forfeit our option. Master chuckled. I think my Divine Mother likes to keep my life interesting. I happened to be staying in the home of someone who was rich but insincere. He could easily have helped us had he been so inclined, but he made no move to do so. I was battling with God. How do you plan to give me that money before noon tomorrow? Everything will be all right, my host said soothingly. Why do you say that? I demanded. I knew the money would come, but God needs human instruments, and this man had shown no interest in serving the work in this capacity. The man left the room. Just then a gust of wind turned my face toward the telephone. There I saw the face of Mrs. Trusk, a lady who had come to me twice for interviews. A voice said, "Call her." I did so at once and explained my predicament to her. After a pause, she said, "Somebody just the other day returned a loan I made him years ago. I never expected to get it back. It was for $5,000. Yes, you may have it." Silently, I offered a prayer of thanks. "Please," I urged her, "be at Mount Washington Estates tomorrow before noon." She promised to come, but by noon the next day, she hadn't yet arrived. Several prospective buyers were waiting like wolves. One of them was telling everyone that he planned to turn the place into a movie school. But the seller announced, "We will wait the rest of the day." Minutes later, Mrs. Trusk arrived. The drama was over. We paid the full purchase price, and Mount Washington was ours. And so let's stop there for this week. It's always so challenging to know how long to talk, to read and listen to Swami each week. This week, one of the main purposes of offering this book study was to make it a little different, where we would meditate on some of the parts. And because it's such a short class, it's a little challenging to do that as well. So it's a kind of cross purposes in some ways. And so it's really down to you to meditate more deeply. But this week I thought we'd start with meditating on a couple of points. The first one, there's a few things I want to mention briefly before we go into meditation. And that is, of course, Yogananda speaking to his disciples directly through his very large and public talks. So he had this personal, deep connection with those that he knew were to be his disciples. I'm sure that even those that weren't disciples in the room were able to feel that what he was saying reached them personally also. But disciples, there was this very personal relationship. And throughout this book, throughout Yogananda's life, we're really exploring the fact what Master's bringing to us is this personal and impersonal relationship with God and Guru. I think nowhere else has it so plainly and continually been highlighted about this deep personal relationship with the divine. And so each of us can personally connect with the Guru, can connect with God. And this is how he reached people. This is when you read Autobiography of a Yogi, the book that Yogananda wrote. He would constantly be asking his Guru, praying to his Guru to intercede for his family, his friends, his needs, his spiritual needs, etc. And so we ourselves, we've discussed this and will continue to discuss this and meditate and think about this personal relationship. We can connect with the divine, and yet it's impersonal as well. But nowhere more deeply has this been shared, at least in my experience of exploring many different spiritual paths, which I have, has this message of this deep personal contact. And I think we've all had that experience where we felt deeply touched by Yogananda. The other aspect to kind of mention was 2 points. One was for those that think 20 months or 20 years, 20 months, or 3 months. This is a very important point here. And I think it really relates in many different ways. How we approach meditation. We think that, it's going to take a while to dive deeply in meditation. Yogananda said, if you were to think that you could go into deep meditation, you'd go straight away. If you really believed and had faith in that, you would go deep into meditation straight away. So he was saying this. This is a teaching that he said in different ways throughout the path. And it's worth reflecting on that. What are the thoughts that you have that think, oh, if only I was like this, if only this happened in my meditations, if only this happened in my regular life, but it's going to take a while to attain. This is something to take away this week and really meditate on. And indeed, you might meditate on it in a moment. And I could say much more on each of these subjects, so I'm just bringing them to a focus here. And then the real point that I really wanted to focus on that we'll take into meditation, Yogananda knows he is going to get to Mount Washington. He's seen it in a vision, not just that first time in India, but multiple times. He's seen this vision. He knows Mount Washington is theirs. That's why he goes on to the property, invites his students, which still, even if you know, it's still pretty outrageous, but he does it. And then the money, he knows it has to come. Yet here he is battling with God. He's battling with God. And so he's in meditation. He's, maybe walking around as you heard, he's kind of thinking things out. Yogananda was a deep thinker, deep meditation, deep prayer, deeply thinking. What are you going to do, God? What are you going to do? How are you going to get me this money? He's battling with God. And again, it reminds me of that point in Autobiography of a Yogi. I've mentioned this before, where Yogananda knows he's going to America. He's had this vision that of these Americans, souls and people sitting in front of him, thousands of them. He knows it's a call to go to America. He's been told this already by his guru of this prophecy. But still, and this is more for our benefit, I think, as is this moment when he asks about what's God going to do about the money. But in that moment in Autobiography, he prays to Babaji, prays to God, and his brain is throbbing and kind of, just on fire because he's praying so deeply and fervently. And so, and eventually Babaji appears to him. And so this is along the same lines. Here he is battling with God. He knows the outcome, but he's battling for us mostly, to show us what needs to happen. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into meditation and bringing these points together, the personal, the impersonal, Guru answers our prayers, the fact that we can create transformation through the grace of God and Guru now, if we pray for it deeply and believe in it deeply. And then really consider now, I'll guide you through this. What are the areas you need to battle with God about right now in that personal, deeply inspiring setting, but with also the mindset that God is going to receive my prayers, and that with my God-given will and energy and dynamism, I can evoke and elicit a response from God. So we're going to take that into meditation. The last thing I'll quickly say is, as I'm studying Whispers from Eternity, which I think many of you know is a deep heart call for me. And this week I'm interviewing Jitendra and Jyotish and Devi on the YouTube channel about their experience with Whispers from Eternity. But what comes to me from Whispers from Eternity is just how to love God and the sheer continual vibrant, radiant, torrential flow of energy that comes through from Yogananda about God. And that's what we're really tapping into here. So let's close the eyes and let's close the eyes. Lift the gaze up to the point between the eyebrows. And you'll take this meditation into your week. So what I mean by that is every day or whenever you feel to or think to, bring this in and maybe even beyond. Feel Yogananda right there. And also feel, see, think, imagine not only Yogananda there, but the divine in whatever aspect is true for you. Maybe Divine Mother, maybe the Father, maybe friend, maybe nature, maybe light, whatever it is for you. Feel both Yogananda and God. Maybe Yogananda is your version of God. Just feel that presence dynamically. And make a personal connection to him, to the divine. Offer your love in a way that's dynamic to you. Speak sincerely from the heart. I love you, I need you. Maybe it's no words at all. And feel that you are offering your entire self to them, not holding back, surrendering to them. And feel that they are blessing you. And there's this two-way relationship, this communication, this communion as friends or as father, son and daughter, mother, son and daughter, as energy, whatever it is. And as they're blessing you and as you're offering your love to them, just bring to mind, what do I need to battle with God about today? What in my life? Maybe it's finances, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a habit you're struggling with, maybe it's a quality you're struggling to develop, maybe it's the state of the world, maybe it's balancing the spiritual with the mundane, whatever it is. Take the moment now. Maybe there's several things that come to mind. Bring them into your consciousness now. And if you've got one thing, or maybe it's several things, now just take a moment to choose one of those things. And with that in mind, let's start a conversation, but we're going to battle with God. But you have to battle in the way that's authentic to you, not the way Yogananda battles, although I think we can draw a great deal of inspiration from that. He's using all of his energy, he's dynamic, all of that. So just begin to have, but rather than going into a straight battle, start to have a dynamic conversation. Maybe it's, Master, from where I am right now, in this moment, today, not yesterday, not tomorrow, right now, help me with regards to XYZ. and then just be sincere. I'm struggling. I'm whatever it is. And start this conversation and then build it with power. So let's meditate on this for about 5 minutes and start to have a two-way communication, but do it with inner intensity that's appropriate and inspiring to you. Get angry if you need to, but always with a sense of this love for the divine, for God. Or get heated and get personal. I know I should know better or differently. And now, as you still continue to meditate and have this inner dialogue, whether it's vibrational, energetic, devotional, or with words mentally, now feel that Master and God are listening to your demands, to your prayer, to your appeal for help, to that battling with God. What are you going to do to help transform me in this area? How are we going to do this together? You know, I'm trying to serve you and live your will. You know, I'm doing my best, even though I fall down and make mistakes. Or if it's more broader about the world, I know you've made this world dualistic and it is a play, but what about it doesn't feel like a play for those people that are not waking up? Whatever that dynamic conversation, but now as we start to churn that, start to really feel that Master is listening to you. They've heard you, that God has heard you, and that with the continual grinding of your consciousness, that they are hearing you more profoundly. Feel that just like you would a friend or a minister or whoever, as you speak to them, they would hear you. Feel that God and Guru are listening to you. And just like Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi, and Yogananda in this story of finding the money for Mount Washington, that God is listening to him, that the gurus are listening. And state again, once again, your opinion, your battle, your plea, your demand. Om, peace, amen. Okay, so this is a very important point that we get throughout our teachings, throughout this book especially. that we can have a dynamic and tangible relationship with God, that every area of our life, the things that we're succeeding in, the things that we are challenged by, can be impacted by our prayers, by our conversations, by our meditations, our service and sadhana, but most especially when we're having this dynamic communication with God. How often does He answer us when we really pray effectively? And this, Yogananda, here he is, just like Swami Kriyananda, which is what always struck me about Swami, his dedication to truth, being very honest. If he said in his mind, I'm going to buy a newspaper, even if someone bought him a newspaper, he would go out and buy one because he'd made that promise to himself. I mean, that is a high level of being your word to yourself and others. And Yogananda had this. It was just part of who he was. And so when that happens, what you say, what you think comes into manifestation, because that's all that you do. And so Yogananda had the power to literally say, I want the money. I need this money. He could manifest it there and then if he wanted to. Yet again and again and again throughout these stories that Swami shares with us in the New Path, other stories from other people and from Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi, he prays relentlessly, deeply. And so one of the things that we can really begin to start to do is to take time where prayer and meditation really are the same thing. I think this is one of the things that I've really drawn from Whispers, is that it's a book of prayer, but it's actually a book of prayer meditations, prayer poem meditations. Meditation is so important with that practice of Whispers. It's not just mentally saying something or out loud, it's turning it into a meditation. And this is what Yogananda is really drawing from us. He's really saying to us to pray over and over again. Often we worry, don't we? We're kind of our hearts. I mean, I do this too. We worry, but what we need to do is we need to get in action. And obviously sometimes that's doing something about it. If it's whatever it is that you have to deal with, you're writing down a list. This is what I can do to make a difference. But if we can begin that process by praying and meditating, but praying and having you have a conversation with people for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes. Why not sit down in prayer and have a conversation with Master and God? One where you're bringing your, often when we're conversing with people, we would never let go. I know a few friends that would just completely go for it anyway. I'm more from the English background. I'm a bit more reserved. But we, just that kind of full-on conversation where you don't hold anything back and you're just, giving it and sharing it. You're sharing your all. And so we can do that. So this week and from now on, start to take time in your sadhana or even outside of your sadhana. Sit down for a moment, have a conversation with God, pray, meditate, merge the two together, and just every area, sit down and write. Finances, relationships, I let this person down, I got these things to make up for, job, spiritual life, I want to overcome these things, I want to develop these things, health, every single area we can bring God into dynamically. Yes, we can work with them all in a sense by practicing the teachings and meditating, but really taking the time, even if it's, a long time. I remember when I first moved to Ananda village, my prayers would be in the beginning of my sadhanas, because I couldn't, I was going to the village and, everyone was meditating for an hour and a half in the morning, if not more. And I was certainly trying to do more, but my mind wasn't used to sitting for a long time in meditation. So I'd have these long prayers at the beginning where I would get really focused and talk to God from my heart. So talk from your heart, battle if you need to, but demand, not just one day, but continually, and really try out praying over a period of time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes. Really try it. If you've got an area you are struggling with, what is 30 or 40 minutes? Close your eyes, talk to God. Or keep your eyes open, pace up and down, talk to God. Journal about it. What is that if you really want to change something? I'm talking to myself here as well. I'm not just coming here from I got it. This is what's really coming through. So this week, continue meditating on Master's mission. Broad mission, we're very slowly going through this chapter, meditating on your own mission if you feel to, what you're doing, conversation, friendship. This friendship with God and Guru needs to be more tangible, more real than any human relationship. Let's make it so. Let's transform our very lives through this practice. God bless everybody. Have a great week.